Porter's 5 forces is a model which shows the 5 forces which shape the competitive environment of an industry. The central force that Porter identified is rivalry within the industry. So that's the number of firms in the market and the intensity of the competition between them. In the supermarket industry, you've got Tesco, Asda, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, so on, all competing with each other within the same industry. They're releasing new products, maybe cutting their prices to try and get more customers that way. Now, the greater the rivalry, the more challenging that businesses will find it to retain customers and keep their revenue and profit at high levels. We've then got the threat of new entrants. So that's how easy it is for firms not currently in the market to set up and become rivals. Now that could be brand new businesses, or it could be firms that are currently operating in other markets. So maybe a business opening a brand new chain of supermarkets to compete with those incumbents would be an example of a threat of new entrant. Now in most industries, there will be barriers to entry which can make this quite tricky. So some examples of this might be startup costs. So purchasing the land and buildings to operate supermarkets would be a really significant barrier. You've also got economies of scale. Businesses that are new to the industry are likely to be on a smaller scale than the incumbents, which means they can't access those lower unit costs that come with purchasing in such large quantities. You've also got brand loyalty and trust, which can mean customers stick with the firms they know rather than giving those new entrants a chance. And the greater these barriers to entry are, the lower the threat of new entrants to the industry and the easier that incumbent firms will find it to retain their customers and their profitability. Then we've got the threat of substitutes, which is the possibility of consumers switching to a different alternative outside of the industry. So we're not talking about consumers here switching to another business in the industry or even a new entrant coming into the market, but we're talking about them replacing their purchase with buying something from a totally different industry. So maybe traditional supermarkets dealing with the threat of delivery services from Amazon would be an example of the threat of a substitute. Another example could be the digital camera market, totally destroyed by the emergence of smartphones, which would be a substitute there. The more viable substitutes there are, the harder it will be for firms to retain their profitability, because they will find that customers find it quite easy to substitute purchases in other industries for what they were previously buying. Buyer power is the extent to which customers can exert influence over the business that they're purchasing from. And some industries, buyers have more power than others, because it's going to be affected by the size of their orders and the number of firms that they can choose from. So you could argue that supermarket buyers have quite a lot of power, because if they decide they don't like one, there's always another of the big chains within a few miles. And that's why you see prices being pushed down quite a lot within supermarkets. But the other side to that is each individual customer is such a small proportion of total supermarket sales that does diminish that buyer power quite significantly. Supplier power is the same concept, but on the side of the supplier. So some businesses are tied into very long contracts with their suppliers. In the case of supermarkets, they're so large and it's such an important part of their suppliers' sales that they'll have most of the power in that relationship. Now, the greater the power of a business's buyers and suppliers, the more they'll find their profits squeezed in the middle here, as buyers put downward pressure on prices while suppliers demand higher prices at their end, which is going to push up costs.